In the quiet suburban neighborhood of Maplewood Heights, life was governed by the rules set forth by the Homeowners Association, HOA. The HOA was meant to maintain order and property values, but over time, it had transformed into a source of frustration for many residents. At the heart of this turmoil was Karen Thompson, the self-appointed enforcer of HOA regulations. With her meticulously organized clipboard and a penchant for nitpicking, she roamed the streets like a hawk, ready to swoop down on anyone who dared to stray from the rigid guidelines. Karen's authority seemed unchallenged, her presence alone instilled fear among homeowners. She had made it her mission to eliminate any semblance of individuality in their community. Brightly painted doors? Not allowed. Decorative lawn ornaments? A violation. And then there were those residents who relied on generators for power during outages or personal needs, an absolute no-no in Karen's eyes. To her, these machines represented chaos and nonconformity. As tension simmered within Maplewood Heights, whispers circulated about Karen's latest target, Tom Mitchell, a mild-mannered resident with health issues that necessitated occasional generator use. He had always been respectful of the community rules but found himself caught in Karen's crosshairs. When she confronted him one afternoon with accusations backed by vague references to HOA bylaws, Tom felt a mix of disbelief and anger. It was evident that this wasn't just about the rules. Karen's disdain stemmed from personal grievances that had nothing to do with property standards. The community stood divided as some sympathized with Tom while others feared crossing Karen. However, her iron-fisted reign was beginning to foster resentment among neighbors who quietly wished for change. Little did they know that soon enough, circumstances would turn against their strict enforcer and redefine their understanding of power and vulnerability in unexpected ways. Tom Mitchell was not just any resident of Maplewood Heights, he was a quiet, introspective man in his mid-40s, known for his warm smile and willingness to lend a hand to neighbors. However, beneath his friendly demeanor lay a struggle that few in the community understood. Tom had been living with a chronic health condition that required him to rely on a generator for vital medical equipment during outages. This necessity made him particularly vulnerable to the whims of the ever-watchful Karen Thompson. In his backyard, Tom kept his generator meticulously maintained, knowing it was essential for his well-being. For years, he had respected the HOA's rules, ensuring that his property remained within the community's aesthetic standards. His home was painted in muted colors and decorated modestly, a contrast to Karen's loud disapproval of residents who dared to express their individuality. Yet now, the very tool that ensured his safety became the target of her ire. When Karen confronted Tom about the generator, her tone dripped with condescension. She declared it a violation of HOA rules, invoking a vague clause that seemed crafted to exert control rather than promote community harmony. Tom felt his blood boil as he listened to her accusations. He had always been respectful and compliant, and now, he was being treated like a pariah for something he desperately needed. Her words were fueled by an air of superiority and personal vendetta that left him both incredulous and frustrated. Despite his growing anxiety over the conflict, Tom understood the stakes involved. He could feel the tension in the air. It was palpable among the other residents who observed the escalating confrontation. Although many sympathized with him, they were bound by fear of Karen's retribution. As the whispers grew louder among neighbors, Tom found himself standing at a crossroads: either stand up against Karen's unreasonable demands or risk losing access to the lifeline that kept him healthy. It was a choice that would soon have far-reaching consequences for them both. The day of confrontation arrived, marked by a stifling tension in the air. Tom was tending to his garden when he spotted Karen striding toward him, her clipboard clutched tightly in one hand and an expression of determined righteousness etched across her face. He knew that look all too well. It signaled a battle was about to commence. "Tom, we need to talk," she announced, her voice cutting through the chirping of nearby birds like a knife. "I've received complaints about your generator." Tom's heart sank. "What complaints?" "It's essential for my medical needs," he replied, trying to keep his tone calm despite the anxiety bubbling beneath the surface. Karen's lips curled into a patronizing smile as if she relished the moment. "You know the HOA has strict regulations against generators, especially those that are visible from the street." She waved her clipboard dismissively, as if this were a trivial matter rather than an essential issue for his health. "It's unsightly and disruptive." "Disruptive?" Tom echoed incredulously. I've never had any noise complaints from my neighbors. I only use it when necessary." With exaggerated patience, Karen looked at him as if explaining something to a child. "Rules are rules, Tom. They're designed to maintain the integrity of our community. I can't have people like you ignoring them just because you feel entitled." Her tone dripped with condescension, and Tom could see the personal animosity behind her words. This was about more than just property values. As Karen continued to rattle off vague clauses from the HOA bylaws that seemed invented for her convenience, Tom felt his anger simmering. He was fighting not just for his right to use the generator but also for his dignity against someone so blatantly misusing her power. The knowledge that she derived pleasure from controlling others only fueled his resolve. "Karen," he finally interjected, trying to maintain composure, "my health depends on this generator, it's not just a piece of equipment to me." But her eyes remained resolute as she delivered her ultimatum: either silence the generator or face potential sanctions from the HOA. With that final proclamation hanging in the air, Tom realized he was no longer just a bystander in this conflict. He was poised at the edge of resistance against a faceless bureaucracy wielded by one individual's overreach. What would be at stake and what would he ultimately decide remained uncertain in that moment charged with tension and impending fallout. As whispers of the confrontation spread through Maplewood Heights, the community began to take notice. Some homeowners expressed sympathy for Tom, recognizing the unfairness of Karen's demands, while others found themselves dreading any fallout from speaking out. The neighborhood, once a peaceful haven, was now a boiling pot of divided opinions and hushed conversations. In the following days, Tom found himself at the center of discussions in nearby yards and driveways. While Karen's supporters parroted her mantra about maintaining property values and community aesthetics, those who had lived beside Tom for years echoed their agreement with his plight. Many shared stories of their own encounters with Karen's draconian enforcement of HOA rules, recounting instances where she had picked apart their personal choices, whether it be outdoor decorations or landscaping. Margaret, an elderly woman with an overflowing flower garden next door, stepped forward one afternoon as Tom tended to his plants. "You know," she said softly but firmly, "I've seen how you've taken care of your property. This is ridiculous, and I think you should stand up to her." Her kindness bolstered Tom's spirits. He wasn't alone in this battle after all. Even Mark and Lisa, a younger couple who had just moved in, quietly expressed their support to Tom in person. They shared incredulity over Karen's rigid interpretation of the rules and offered to organize a small meeting among interested neighbors to discuss the issue openly. As more people rallied around him, camaraderie blossomed. These discussions morphed into a sort of informal support group where residents began sharing not only their frustrations with Karen but also ideas on how to challenge her authority respectfully and collectively. Tom felt a sense of solidarity growing as they planned ways to address the situation together. The atmosphere transformed from one of fear into hope. Collaboration fueled determination in the face of adversity. Perhaps this confrontation would not just be about his generator after all. It could spark a much-needed change in their community dynamic, a pushback against a single individual wielding too much power over them all. Just as the community began to find its voice against Karen's overreach, an unexpected blackout swept through Maplewood Heights, plunging homes into darkness without warning. The sudden loss of power caused immediate chaos. Lights flickered off, refrigerators hummed to a halt, and the soft buzz of electronic devices faded into silence. Panic set in as residents scrambled to gather candles, flashlights, and whatever backup power sources they could find. Tom felt a wave of anxiety wash over him. He immediately turned on his generator in the backyard, grateful for its presence despite the looming threats from Karen. As he connected the necessary equipment, he could hear the commotion outside, the sound of doors slamming, voices raised in confusion, and the desperate attempts of neighbors trying to cope with the sudden loss of electricity. Across the street, Karen's home stood dark and quiet, a stark contrast to her usual authoritative presence. Tom couldn't help but feel a sense of schadenfreude. She had enforced the rules about generators so vigorously, yet now she was among those left powerless. He watched as some residents gathered outside her home, peering at her windows, their faces reflecting a mix of curiosity and concern. Within a short time, neighbors began converging around Tom's property, drawn by the generator's hum. "Tom! You still have power," called out Lisa frantically. Mark was nearby, and others followed suit, seeking refuge from the chaos that had overtaken their neighborhood. As people gathered in his yard, Tom felt a surge of unity among them that had been absent before. The urgency of their situation overshadowed previous divisions. It became clear they needed solutions rather than finger-pointing. With an air of determination settling over them, Tom made a decision. "I can help with essentials," he said firmly but kindly to the group forming around him. "I can run a few medical devices and keep our refrigerators going for now." Collective relief washed over their faces as promises were made to share resources, each person contributing to keep things going until power was restored. Little did they know that this moment would mark a turning point in their community's dynamics. As they came together out of necessity, they would soon face an even more profound reckoning with Karen and her rules once order was restored. As the darkness enveloped Maplewood Heights, Karen Thompson found herself in a state of increasing panic. The comfortable routine she had enforced upon her neighbors was now shattered by the very power outage that had rendered her home lifeless. She fumbled through her darkened house, desperately flipping switches that produced only silence and shadows. The air felt stifling. All around her, the familiar sounds of modern life had ceased. "What am I supposed to do now?" she muttered to no one but herself, her voice tinged with frustration. She had always prided herself on being self-sufficient and in control, but this blackout exposed a vulnerability she rarely acknowledged: her dependence on electricity for everything from cooking to climate control. The absence of light and warmth made her feel increasingly exposed and helpless. Karen's initial reaction was denial. Surely the power would be restored soon. However, as minutes turned into hours, her anxiety spiraled. She watched from her window as neighbors congregated in Tom's yard, their laughter mingling with the hum of his generator. The realization hit her harder than the darkness outside. They were banding together while she stood alone in her silent home, surrounded by nothing but the weight of her own arrogance. She grabbed her phone, wanting to call anyone, for help, only to find it useless without a charge. Her thoughts raced back to Tom's generator, the very device she had targeted with such fervor just days before. In that moment of desperation and realization, the irony tore at her. She had enforced rules with an iron fist while failing to recognize how reliant she was on the same community she had tried to dominate. Finally, as shadows loomed larger in both her home and mind, a sense of dread settled over Karen. She paced back and forth, wrestling with pride and necessity. The thought of approaching Tom for assistance sent shivers down her spine. How could she face him after what she'd done? Yet as hunger gnawed at her stomach and the chill settled in around her, survival instincts kicked in. With deep breaths and trembling hands, Karen steeled herself for what lay ahead. She would need to confront not only the darkness outside but also the consequences of her actions within the community she had sought to control. As the generator hummed steadily in Tom's backyard, a palpable sense of relief washed over the gathered neighbors. With the power of the generator, Tom was able to provide essential support, running lights and keeping refrigerators operational for those who needed it most. His willingness to help stood in stark contrast to Karen's previous actions, showcasing a generosity that resonated deeply with his community. "Thank you, Tom," Lisa said gratefully, her voice cutting through the soft noise of the generator. "We wouldn't know what to do without you." Her expression mirrored that of many others present, who were now relying on Tom's kindness instead of succumbing to the chaos around them. Tom felt a surge of purpose as he moved among his neighbors, checking in on their needs and making sure everyone was comfortable. He reconnected medical devices for those requiring them and ensured that food would not spoil in the fridges. It was a small but meaningful way to give back to a community that had rallied around him, and it filled him with pride to see everyone coming together in this moment of crisis. Meanwhile, Karen watched from her window, her heart heavy with regret as she saw neighbors enjoying camaraderie and support that she had tried to suppress with her strict enforcement of rules. The very generator she had targeted for banishment now served as a symbol of unity and resilience. Each laugh and shared story from Tom's yard pierced her like a dagger, forcing her to confront the consequences of her actions and the isolation she had crafted for herself. Still wrestling with her pride, she paced back and forth in her darkened home. The irony was not lost on her. While she had spent years enforcing rules to control others, here was Tom, generous and selfless, using his generator to lift up those around him. It was a stark reminder that true strength lies not in authority but in community support and compassion. Finally, realizing she could no longer remain detached, Karen took a deep breath and stepped outside. As she approached Tom's yard, apprehension washed over her. She was about to face the very person she had wronged. But there was no turning back now. Her need for power forced her into a reality she had long denied. Would Tom be willing to help, despite everything? As she neared the gathering, all eyes turned toward her, revealing a moment that would change everything in Maplewood Heights. Taking a deep breath, Karen stepped out of her house and into the cold night, feeling the weight of her earlier decisions press down on her. The sounds of laughter and chatter from Tom's yard became a stark reminder of her isolation. She approached cautiously, uncertainty gnawing at her. Each step felt like an act of surrender, but desperation surged within her. She needed assistance. As she reached the edge of Tom's gathering, the conversations abruptly ceased, and all eyes turned toward her. Their faces reflected surprise, disbelief, and curiosity, their enforcer now standing among them, exposed and vulnerable. The shame she had once projected onto others now fell squarely on her shoulders, heavy and suffocating. "Tom," she began, her voice faltering as she struggled to maintain any sense of authority. I need your help." The admission tasted foreign, each word heavy with irony. The very person she had sought to control was now her only lifeline. Tom looked at her with a mixture of caution and compassion, stepping forward slightly while the crowd remained silent. "Karen, you know why I've been using my generator," he replied slowly, aware of the delicate nature of the moment. "You've made it clear that it was against the rules." Her cheeks flushed with embarrassment as she glanced around at her neighbors. The humiliation of being backed into a corner by those she had sought to dominate stung deeply. "I understand that," she said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "But I can't stay in this darkness anymore. I need power for my home." Tom saw the desperation etched on her face. The normally self-assured Karen was now nothing more than another resident caught in a predicament beyond her control. It struck him how this moment revealed a new side of her vulnerability. Beneath the tough exterior lay someone who ultimately relied on the same community that she had so fiercely attempted to manage. After a brief pause filled with tension, he nodded. "All right, we can work something out," he said gently, inviting Karen into a new understanding grounded in empathy rather than authority. As their eyes met, Tom felt a shift. Perhaps this experience could bridge the divide between them and initiate a change not only within Karen but in their community as well. In this moment of irony, where Karen had sought to control but found herself powerless, there lay an opportunity for growth and reconciliation that neither had anticipated. As Tom stood before Karen, grappling with her plea for help, an internal struggle began to unfold within him. The memories of her harsh words and accusations flooded his mind, a stark reminder of the authority she had wielded over him and others in their community. Part of him wanted to turn away, to tell her that she had made her bed and should lie in it. After all, didn't she deserve to experience the consequences of her actions? Yet another part of Tom, a deeper, more compassionate part, recognized the vulnerability in Karen's eyes. Here was a woman who had always presented herself as strong and unwavering, now reduced to pleading for support in a time of crisis. This juxtaposition stirred something within him, a realization that despite her past transgressions, she was still a member of their community who needed assistance. Tom glanced at the neighbors gathered around him, their expressions mixed with curiosity and apprehension. They had all witnessed Karen's authoritarian rule and the way she had targeted him for simply trying to survive. Would they judge him if he chose to help? Would they see it as weakness or betrayal? But in the chaos of the blackout, their shared reliance on one another had transformed the atmosphere from one of division to solidarity. Taking a deep breath, he reminded himself of the importance of forgiveness and community support, values he had always believed in, even when challenged by the actions of others. He thought about how easily anger can poison relationships and how the chance to heal could foster real change for them all. With a steady voice, Tom spoke, "Karen, I understand that you're scared right now. We've all faced challenges, but this is an opportunity for us to come together. I'll help you with power from my generator." Her eyes widened with surprise and relief, gratitude replacing desperation as she registered his willingness to assist. In that moment, Tom felt a weight lift from his shoulders. A choice was made that not only reflected his character but also offered a chance for redemption for Karen. This interaction marked a pivotal turning point. It was more than just about power, it was about bridging divides and fostering understanding in a community that had been fractured. As they faced this challenge together, both Tom and Karen realized that personal growth often begins with vulnerability, providing them each with a path toward reconciliation and renewal. As Tom prepared to help Karen, he took a moment to gather his thoughts and set clear boundaries. While he felt compelled to offer her assistance during this crisis, he wasn't about to overlook the past or allow her entitlement to dictate their new dynamic. "I'll let you use the generator, Karen," he began, his tone firm yet compassionate, "but I need you to understand that this is a one-time arrangement. I can't be your fallback or the subject of your rules anymore." Karen nodded slowly, understanding the sincerity behind his words. "I realize I haven't treated you fairly," she admitted, her voice laced with humility. I've been so focused on maintaining control that I didn't see how it affected the people around me." Tom could see the weight of her realization settling in. Though her admission didn't erase the past, it hinted at a willingness for change, both in her actions and in their relationship. He gestured toward the generator as he continued, "It's important for us to support each other in our community, but that work goes both ways. I hope this can initiate a new chapter for us." The atmosphere shifted. Neighbors who had been observing cautiously now exchanged glances of approval. They sensed a turning point not just for Tom and Karen, but for the entire neighborhood. Whether Karen was willing to embrace this moment of growth remained to be seen, but Tom's decision reflected his commitment to personal integrity and moral values. Once they connected Karen's equipment to the generator, a flicker of light filled her home, dispelling some of the darkness that had surrounded her both physically and metaphorically. Tom felt a sense of accomplishment, not just for helping another resident but for standing firm in his principles. As the chaos of the blackout continued outside, the seeds of community support were beginning to take root. The event served as a reminder that collaboration could emerge from even the most contentious circumstances. Tom realized that while he had offered Karen help, he was also asserting his boundaries and reinforcing his own strength in the face of adversity. This experience ultimately allowed both Tom and Karen to find common ground, a foundation for healing and rebuilding trust within their community. As they forged ahead together, they embraced an opportunity for transformation that would resonate far beyond the confines of their individual conflicts. As the blackout gradually faded into memory and power was restored, the residents of Maplewood Heights emerged from the crisis transformed. What had begun as tension between Karen Thompson and Tom Mitchell ultimately evolved into a testament of community spirit and resilience. The very generator that served as a focal point of conflict became a symbol of cooperation, reminding everyone that challenges often bring out the best in people. Tom's decision to help Karen, despite their tumultuous history, illustrated the profound impact of forgiveness and compassion in times of need. It was a lesson not only for them but also for all the neighbors who had witnessed their interaction. As Karen stepped back into her home with a renewed sense of purpose, she carried with her the realization that leadership involves empathy and understanding, not just authority. The experience had rippled outwards, strengthening the bonds among residents. Conversation shifted from whispers about grievances to open discussions about collaboration and mutual support. Neighbors checked in on one another more frequently, fostering an environment where everyone felt connected rather than isolated. Tom became a shared hero. For many, he represented courageous integrity amidst adversity. In those days following the blackout, there was a palpable shift in how everyone approached community matters. The formerly stringent HOA rules were reassessed through a communal lens that emphasized balance rather than dictatorship. Residents began engaging collaboratively to discuss not only regulations but also how they could enrich their neighborhood spirit. Karen became more involved than ever before, finding herself at community meetings advocating for fairness and inclusivity, principles she had once overlooked in favor of strict adherence to rules. Through her interactions with Tom and others, she learned the value of humility and the strength found within vulnerability. Ultimately, karma played out beautifully. What had seemed like misfortune evolved into an opportunity for personal growth and renewal for both Karen and Tom. In recognizing their shared humanity amidst adversity, they forged an unexpected alliance that echoed through Maplewood Heights, a reminder that even in challenging circumstances, compassion can light the way forward, binding communities together in solidarity. As they looked towards the future, this chapter marked not just an end to past conflicts but also a hopeful beginning, a chance for compassion, understanding, and lasting unity amidst life's inevitable trials.